So I just recorded a video for the main channel, which is based on this topic. It's kind of like the hard times create strong men concept. And I've been thinking quite a lot about this. So if you haven't already, I highly recommend that you listen or you read the book Hard Times Create Strong Men by Stefan Ernio. It's a long-ass book. The audiobook's literally the longest one I've ever. It took me like a couple of months to go through. It's like 26 hours long, so it's like 5 times longer than every other audiobook that I've ever had. And the concept is just men are weak, and weak men will destroy. Weak men will not destroy society, but will lead to society being destroyed by another nation that has strong men. So history seems to repeat itself. And we as young men watching this, we are oblivious to this, and we think that it would never happen. We've never really experienced, for most of us living in like Western nations, we've never really experienced war. There has been wars in our lifetime. There has been like in Afghanistan, Iraq and stuff. But most of us live in the UK or the US or countries where there hasn't actually been all-out war on the streets. Most of us have lived very relatively normal lives, and we kind of expect it with our lens of like, you know, our lens of our lives and our bias. We kind of expect it to stay the same. We couldn't imagine like a true war starting right now, but it could. And it might be closer than we actually think. And it might have already started. So we'll discuss that concept in a second as well. But the history repeats itself, and the pattern is that quote of hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. So the question right now is, okay, which part of that quote are we in right now? Potentially I think we're in a mix right now. I think we're transitioning. I think we are currently in the, which one is it? Fuck, my brain just like turned off then. The strong men create good times, weak men create hard times. Yeah, I think we're just before the weak men. My brain just turned off then. I think we're just before the weak men create hard times. I think that's just about starting, in the sense that we can, you know, see hard times, we can see turmoil in some countries, we can see chaos and uprising, and we can see like a huge level of like depression and suicide and mental health problems. But I also feel like we are somewhat inside yet ending of the time of strong men create good times, because we are like, technically we are in good times. There has never really been a safer time to live. There's never been a time with like such low crime and such low like poverty and everything, and everyone has got like more than they need. So we are like certainly in a good time. But I think the prosperous era of like the last like 10 to 20 years, when people felt like that was probably the best case scenario, was how things were maybe 10, 15. I might be wrong because there was a recession in 2008 and everything. But generally around that time, there wasn't anywhere near the level of like mental health problems and everything. But like there was a level of like prosperity between like, you know, the white Western nations. People felt like they were more middle class and everything. But either way, we are about to enter the hard times, because weak men are amongst us, and we know this for a fact. And you know, this is kind of like a cliche self-improvement video, like, oh, the rise of weak men, and you know, men are weak and everything, men are jacking off. But it's totally true. I don't think there's a single person who's watching this who wouldn't agree with the fact that like we are surrounded by weak men, and weak men create hard times. I think it's so unbelievable for us to think that something like this could happen on our doorstep. But the way that it would happen, the way that, you know, a nation would fall, which I think it's a possibility. I truly think it's a possibility. Like I think it's almost certain that America will not be like the dominant country, like the dominant force of the world within 10 to 20 years, maybe even less than that, honestly. I reckon it's going to be like for some reason Cuba keeps coming into my mind, and I'm pretty sure it's because I read some like random like zombie book in which Cuba was like the dominant force after like the zombie apocalypse. For some reason that just keeps coming into my mind, but I know for a fact it's not going to be America. It's not going to be like the country that we expect, because it's full of weak men. And there doesn't necessarily have to be an all-out war for this change to happen, because if a country did go to war with America, you'd expect America to win, because they've invested most heavily, I'm pretty sure, out of every other country onto their military. So in an all-out war, yeah, of course. But what Stefan Arnio in that book Hard Times Great Strong Men, what he mentions is very, very interesting. He says that countries can almost secretly go to war with something called submersion. I think it's called submersion. And the idea is that instead of going like in an all-out war with a country, they almost secretly influence the country to destroy itself from the inside. And the number one thing that destroys a country from the inside, this fucking blows my mind, the number one thing that destroys a country from the inside is casual sex. The moment that casual sex is normalized, you can literally look through, this is fucking blows my mind, you can look through times in history, and it's always the same pattern, that like a rising force, I say the Romans, they rise, they conquer. They are now in a time of like ultimate pleasure and reward and hedonistic pleasure, like hedonistic pursuits, because they've conquered everywhere. It's the strongest country and everything. That's when they get weak, because right now they're the strongest country, and that's when they start celebrating. That's when like orgies become normal. And you've probably heard like, kind of like weird stories of like the Romans and like their sex lives and the Greeks and everything. It's the exact same story. They start in ruins. They start out of nowhere. Some like strong man rises, a line of strong men like rise the country, rise the nation. They conquer. They're victorious. They're like the strongest ones, and that's because of that. Because they've won, they get comfortable. You see this on the macro level, so with nations, but you see this on the micro level with like athletes, with rappers, with everyone like who's becoming successful, with most people who become successful. Let's say some random athlete in the UFC, he's fucking working hard, he's grinding, he's like in some shitty gym or something, but he's training hard. And eventually when he gets into the UFC and he makes like a few £100,000, that's when he starts partying, and he was rising, and now he's falling off. Why is he falling off? Because over the last like month he's been partying and stuff, and he starts training, but his training is not as good because he's been taking fucking cocaine and shit. But some other guy's coming up from the ashes, and this other guy can't afford to party because he hasn't reached that level of success yet. Success leads to ruin if you handle it wrong, if you change what actually caused the success in the first place. Because success gives you the capability to now be so distracted by other things. It's kind of like, imagine the rapper who's so like not just talented, but he's working hard, he's in the hood, he's working hard as fuck, and eventually he gets a level of success, he gets signed, he makes $1 million and everything, and he kind of falls off and everyone kind of forgets about him because he made enough money, his belly's full, his nuts are drained because now some like random little thoughts want to like sleep with him and stuff. Now he loses the ambition. That's the micro level, but what happens on the macro level is exactly the same, but just with millions of men in the nation. So the Romans conquered, and eventually they live in such a prosperous, peaceful time where now they can eat like foods high in fat and sugar, and they can drink lots of wine and stuff, and they can lounge around and get a little bit fatter, and they can like push for more policies on like casual sex and everything, and like fucking like children and shit like they did back then. And then what happens? They get destroyed. They get dominated by the nation that isn't indulging in those pleasures, by the nation that's still monogamous, by the nation that's still religious, by the nation that's still intolerant, by the nation that's full of strong men who have not been engaging in casual sex, who have instead been, sold this idea, like fully conditioned with this idea that you will become a strong man and you will attract the love of your life and she will have your children. Because men will fucking fight for that. So imagine how it is right now. Let's say in America or in the UK, we don't really believe in this idea of like marriage, religion or anything, and this is a lot coming from like an atheist, like degenerate, but I'm just kind of giving you the story, and hopefully we can all fucking seek out Islam or something after this. But that, like, I know that sounds almost a little bit silly, but that's probably what's going to happen, honestly. That America right now is full of just weak men eating shitty food, indulging in pleasures, jacking off. Those men aren't doing things, like, they know that they're not going to get love and intimacy, right? So like, of course, we're young men full of ambition, so we think, yeah, we'll get into the top 20%, we'll start sleeping with girls, but you got to realize that the overwhelming majority of men in your country are fucking invisible, that you kind of don't even think about them, that there's tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of men in your country that just know for a fact that they're so used to not having women in their lives that that's no longer something that they even kind of like think about, that they're just so used to watching porn and jacking off. Imagine there is a war. Imagine those men get drafted. They're your brothers in arms. and the war is against an Islamic nation, and those men are fucking strong. They don't watch porn. They don't drink. Those men are fighting for their wives. It's not even gonna. It would be a fucking bloodbath on the Western side. Of course, like new age technology and nukes and shit would of course like even it out, and maybe America would still win. But this is why submersion makes a nation weak from the inside. It makes it essentially blow up from the inside. And the author of that book, Hard Times Create Strong Men, he gave so many interesting ideas that at first I thought he was a bit of a jackass, because he was saying like, oh yeah, immigration is the problem, refugees are the problem. You probably would have never expected me to be like, I wouldn't say I'm against immigration or refugees or anything, but he made some fantastic points that at first I completely disagreed, because I was like, no, refugees are like brown, so he must be racist or something. But it completely made sense where he said like, once you dilute a nation's values by bringing other people in, the nation just gets the nation gets weaker. Once you promote the idea of casual sex and sexuality and feminism and all this shit, like, the nation gets weaker. So there is a quote that he mentions a bunch in the book, and a bunch of you guys would have known it as well, and it is, "A nation is born stoic and dies Epicurean." So a nation being born stoic means that the nation is born through almost like hard will. Like, stoicism is like a philosophy which is quite masculine, and it's this idea of like being emotionally resilient. And there's a huge, like, I don't know enough to like give you fully like answers and stuff, but we'd expect, okay, it's just masculine, right? And Epicurean is all about like pleasure and hedonistic purposes. What I would personally change this quote so we can understand it is that a nation is born patriarchal and dies matriarchal. So a nation is born patriarchal, that means it's born through men. It's born through hard men who rule. Men rule. Masculine, dominant, strong men. But it dies matriarchal. It dies with women's like sexuality. This seems so weird, because it's like, for my entire life, and even now for my own individual pleasure, I promote women's sexuality. So if, for example, I'm saying, oh yeah, women's sexuality is like, pretty much, if there's one thing you could boil this all down to, it literally is just women's sexuality. It's fucking mad, honestly. If there's one thing you can boil the nation falling, like Rome falling, or one of the Western countries falling, it quite literally is all based down to women's sexuality being freed. Because the moment women's sexuality is freed, on a first glance it seems sexist, and it seems like, no, we want to be feminist and we want to like give them equal rights and everything, and in a sense you know we want people to be treated with fairness. When women's sexuality is freed, hypergamy is open, and women's sort of sexual nature is like just let loose, and it's put on steroids with the internet. So women then start dating upwards, and women only want to date the best guys, women only want to sleep with the best guys. That leaves a couple of guys really enjoying women, and like I don't want women's sexuality to be like restrained right now because I'm fucking enjoying it, but the majority of guys don't get to enjoy it. When women's sexuality is freed, automatically women will always start wanting to sleep with the top guys. Especially if they can make their own money and everything, like how we are in the modern society, right? That leaves a solid 90 to maybe 80% of men who are contributing to a country who aren't going to get the most important thing that dominates their mind. And of course, so many guys are going to say, oh, I don't care about girls and stuff, but it's like, it's the number one thing that they're thinking about. About 80% of men in the West are contributing to a country, contributing to a nation or to a state, where they know that they're not going to actually get the reward of like what they actually want. And men are getting pissed off about that. Men are giving up, they're getting aggressive, getting violent. Like, we're all kind of like just about thinking of this like scary time that's about to happen, where there'll be like an incel uprising where 25%, maybe more, maybe 50% of men will be total fucking incels, and they'll give up on society, or they'll voluntarily burn society down because they've been sold this lie. It got me thinking once what kind of tribe Adonis would create. Because the thing is, if you open women's sexuality and you live almost like the stereotypical alpha male who, like, is in the tribe, and the alpha male gets the pick of the women, and he gets to sleep with as many women as possible, that tribe would actually die. So even though, like, I want you to think right now, imagine if you were truly the leader of the tribe, right? Like, finally, you've been working hard and everything, you're the fucking, like, even in real life, okay, let's say you actually get into the top 10% of men right now, right? And women like start fucking wanting you. You start getting 50 matches a day on Tinder. 50. you start actually meeting like women, like a new woman, like multiple times a week, at least once a week or something, you would be somewhat destroying society by actually indulging in that capability of having multiple women. Because sex and dating is truly a zero-sum game. If you're fucking multiple women, that means, like, let's say you're sleeping with 3 girls instead of just, you know, your fair share of 1. That means essentially 2 guys are not sleeping with those extra 2 girls that you got. And of course, you know, like, how do we feel about this? Because on one side we can say like, oh no, but you know, you work hard and they're attracted to you and everything. I think that that's potentially the death of society right there. Because if we imagine it on like an easier to imagine smaller scale of the tribe, there's 100 guys, 100 women, and Adonis is like number 1. We won't use Adonis because we want to keep him like nice and clean without like the degenerate idea, but you know, some random alpha male's number 1. And so he's the leader, he's the strongest by far. Him and like his 3 buddies are fucking all the women. You know, most of the women that they want, right? So they're living the good life, they're living the alpha male life, you know, they're the strongest, the most testosterone, so they get to do that, right? That tribe will die because 90 of those guys are not sleeping with those women. 90 of those guys are not like, they don't need to work hard for anything in a sense. They can like, you know, for the sense of safety in the tribe, yeah, fair enough. But like, they're missing a literally fundamental need. I want to like restate this so many times because so many of us in the modern day young men, we downplay how important sex, love and relationships is. Maslow literally put it amongst the most fundamental needs. Amongst breathing and drinking water, he put sex. So it is fucking important. Because it's one of those things that if you aren't not, it's one of those things that if you're not getting it, your mind obsesses over it. And we all can relate to that. So in this example tribe, 95 guys are not getting that fundamental need. What would happen? If they go into war, they wouldn't fight as hard. They're not going to work as hard. If there's a time to overthrow the couple of alpha male, like the alpha male and, you know, his 2-3 buddies or something, those 95 guys are going to fucking bash their skulls with a rock so that they can take over. It wouldn't last. And you know what's so interesting? Like, tribes and society truly, like, our development as like a human species went like this. Nothing happened. Boom. We kind of know this, right? Nothing happened for hundreds of thousands of years, even when like society was starting to get built in like the Egyptian times and everything. Nothing, like, no technological advancement really happened. Boom. What happened about here? What truly happened about here is religion. It was the push for monogamy. It was a push for marriage. It was a push for family. Before this time, the family wasn't like really an important thing. You'd imagine, like, it was like the top men had like harems. The top men would be just fucking like women, and the women would just be like raising the children. The kids would be going through some like random like rite of passage. I don't know enough about history, right? But I'm just making shit up. Maybe someone can like truly tell us what happened in like Egyptian times or something. But there was a point in society about 2,000 years ago when religions really started to take off, and religions pushed, like fully, not just pushed and not like fully just conditioned the idea, the importance of the nuclear family, man, woman, children. It's after that point that society actually, like a human, like mankind took off. Because that was like the selling point that we all needed to be told, yes, work hard, be moral, do the right things, you will get a wife and children. You, like, as a man, like, you will be the head of the house. Like, Christianity called God the Father. That, at that point in society, in mankind, the man was, like, actually given the inspiration and the purpose to not be a fucking degenerate. That shit blows my mind. I don't even know if I've explained it to the extent that of how important that would have been for humans, for our like species. It gave men like a reason to exist. It gave men like a true purpose. Because previously it was just kind of, okay, survive and reproduce, survive and have children, and that was like, okay, with the shit we were doing. But we were living almost like in slums 2,000 years ago, 5,000. We were living like fucking cavemen, and like, you know, the shit's like all over the place and stuff. It was when religions push the importance of raising a family, and it was like, religion is kind of like a multi-level marketing strategy where it's kind of this thing of like, it grows through converting an adult, like a person, and then that person starts converting their children. So religion's pushed, like, it's a very like smart way to grow it exponentially, but it starts with like the adult, starts with the man and the woman and stuff, and when they have children, they're automatically going to make their children Christian or Muslim or whatever faith that they had. So what happens now that we don't have fathers? We're living in like the most fatherless state that we've seen for like thousands of years. Feminism killed the father. So what's happening to society now? Like, the family's not really that important. You're seeing a bunch of like different like alternative type of families and everything, and you know, in a sense, like, yeah, respect to them, give them rights and everything, but like, it's very difficult to state some things, because along with, you know, like, think like the shit that's happening, there is also like this level of like PC culture where like you can't speak ill of the new modern sort of like things of like LGBT, and I don't have anything ill to say of them at all, but it's kind of like, I'm not saying it for me because I get fucking cancelled, so I'm gonna watch what I say, but like Stefan Arnio, the author, he says that that's linked to like the death of the society, because that destroys the family. You kill the father, you kill the nation. The nation is simply just the father. The nation is only as strong as its nuclear family. And the nuclear family is dying. It started 100 years ago when like feminism started coming in and stuff. And like every time I have to give a disclaimer and say like, I'm not exactly like anti-feminist. I'm certainly not like anti-women. Like, I get this question quite often, and people say like, do you actually hate women? I was like, bro, I'm telling you right now, like, I love and respect like the feminine energy more than like, you don't even fucking understand femininity, bro. So like, shut the fuck up, right? No, many people don't even understand the difference between like femininity and masculinity. I'm telling you right now of how much I fucking desire that in my life. But that being said, me saying that feminism was like somewhat of like a bad, like catastrophic influence on the nations, like, it isn't me being anti-women. It's just realizing the consequences of like, not so much equal rights and fairness, that 100%, like, you know, we should have had that a long time ago, but it is specifically to do with sexuality. Because for thousands of years, women's sexuality, oh, my camera's gonna die, I just want to end this quick. For thousands of years, women's sexuality was restricted up until 100 years ago, and now men are weak. I think dark times are coming because of that. Do the hard work, especially when you don't feel like it. Mwah.